Disappearances don't always begin with a scream. Sometimes they begin with silence. And in the small town of Fairhaven, that silence was deafening. Ethan Cole was 17 years old. The last time anyone saw him, a senior at Fairhaven Regional High. He was known as quiet but smart, the kind of teen who blended into the background, more observer than participant. His teachers described him as unremarkably polite. His classmates, a little distant but nice. Ethan wasn't the type to stir trouble. He wasn't the type to run away. And yet, he was gone. It was Friday, October 14th, just another fall day. Leaves fell like confetti in the cold breeze. School ended at 3:05 p.m., and Ethan was captured briefly on a hallway security camera, walking with his backpack slung low, earbuds in. His expression was blank, focused. He exited the school building alone, heading toward the bike rack. That footage would later become the last verified image of Ethan Cole alive. Fairhaven wasn't the kind of place that made the news. Nestled between cornfields and hills, its biggest headlines came from high school football or the occasional storm damage. The kind of town where doors stayed unlocked, and neighbors knew your dog's name. So when Ethan didn't come home that night, his parents, Melissa and David Cole, didn't panic right away. "He's probably with Jake," his mother said, referring to Ethan's best friend. But when calls to Jake turned up, nothing, and Ethan's phone kept going straight to voicemail, that comfort eroded quickly. By 10:43 p.m., Melissa called the local sheriff's office and filed an official missing person report. "We responded immediately. Ethan wasn't a troubled kid, had no record. His parents were respected in town. Folks we knew. It wasn't like him. When we got to the house, it was still. His room was neat. Nothing seemed off. Ethan's bike was found leaning against the back porch. His phone and wallet were on his nightstand untouched. His laptop, open but asleep. There were no signs of forced entry, no mess, no note, just absence." Investigators combed through the usual checklist. Did he have a girlfriend? A fight with family? A reason to leave? Melissa Cole insisted there was nothing. He was quiet, yes, but not unhappy. He had plans. College, art school, maybe even something with computers. He wasn't the type to vanish. The Coles were a private family. David worked in logistics. Melissa volunteered at the library. They lived in a modest home at the edge of town, where the woods met the back fence. It was quiet, peaceful, maybe too peaceful. When Ethan didn't return the next morning, panic fully set in. The sheriff's department issued a bolo, "Be on the lookout," and local volunteers joined in search parties. Drones scanned the forest. Bloodhounds followed his scent trail, which led to the edge of Carson's Hollow, an old overgrown trail behind the school grounds, and stopped cold. There the trail simply ended. What makes a person vanish without a trace? No struggle, no scream, no goodbye, just gone. Ethan's classmates began posting about him online. His face, pale with sandy brown hair and gray eyes, spread across social media with the hashtag #FindEthan. But with every hour, hope thinned. The night before he disappeared, Ethan had been in his room sketching. That detail came from his younger sister, Mia, who remembered glancing over his shoulder and seeing weird symbols on the page, almost like a logo or rune. When she asked what it was, he shut the sketchbook quickly and told her it was just a doodle. At the time, she didn't think much of it. By day 3, the town of Fairhaven was on high alert. Roadblocks were set up on rural routes. Canvassing continued. The local news ran back-to-back coverage, but with no sign of Ethan. No calls, texts, sightings, or transactions. Investigators began to fear the worst. One detail stood out. Ethan had deleted a number of messages from his phone the week before he vanished. Not unusual, unless you know how teens use their phone. Most leave digital trails everywhere. Ethan, he'd gone out of his way to erase things. Then came the next discovery, one that would send a chill down the spines of detectives. On day 5 of the search, an anonymous tip came in through the sheriff's hotline. A voice, male, possibly young, said 6 words before hanging up. "Check the old stone chapel." Midnight. Detectives traced the call to a burner phone. Untraceable. The old stone chapel was a crumbling structure just outside town, near the wood. It hadn't held a service in decades. Rumors swirled about it. Kids said it was haunted, used for dares and dumb YouTube videos, a local relic of forgotten faith. At midnight, 2 deputies and a K-9 unit entered the building. What they found inside wasn't Ethan, but it was the first real clue. Scrawled in red paint across the crumbling altar was a single phrase: "I did what you asked." There were no fingerprints, no footprints, no sign of Ethan, just the paint, and something else. Carved into one of the pews, small, precise, was a strange symbol. It looked almost like a tattoo. This was no ordinary disappearance, and the symbol would be the beginning of a truth no one was prepared to face. In small towns, silence speaks louder than screams, and when one of your own vanishes, it echoes in every corner. Fairhaven wasn't built to withstand mysteries. It was the kind of place where stories ended with "and they lived happily ever after," until Ethan Cole vanished. By the 6th day of his disappearance, a transformation had taken place. The town that once slept with doors unlocked, now double-bolted them. Parents walked their kids to school. Teenagers deleted their social media profiles, and whispers started to crawl between the cracks of everyday life. In diners, at bus stops, between shelves in the library. "Did you hear what they found in the chapel?" "I heard it was a ritual. That boy was into something dark." The media caught on by the end of the week. What started as a local news item became regional coverage, then national. The ingredients were too alluring for the headlines to resist. A teenager, a mysterious symbol, a cryptic message at an abandoned chapel, and absolutely no answer. Local reporter Sandra Wren, who'd previously covered nothing heavier than school board meetings, suddenly found herself standing in front of camera crews from national networks. She later described it as a media storm in a place that had never seen one. There were cameras on front lawns, strangers knocking on neighbors' doors, and a lot of questions no one could answer. Ethan's parents, Melissa and David, did what they could to remain composed, but in the one interview they gave, which aired on Channel 6, the pain was unmistakable. "We just want our son home," Melissa said, her voice trembling. "Please, if you know anything, say something. Ethan, if you're out there, we love you." That was the last time they spoke publicly. Behind the scenes, investigators were scrambling. Every clue led to a dead end. The symbol found at the chapel had been photographed and sent to multiple analysts. No gang affiliations, no known occult groups, no database match. But then, a local librarian named Edie Wallace, who moonlighted as a genealogist and folklore enthusiast, made an unusual connection. It wasn't from any traditional database, she told police, but it looked eerily similar to a sigil described in 19th-century European folklore, one associated with a secret society of watchers, people who claimed to guard dangerous knowledge. Most officers dismissed her, but the coincidence was noted in the case file. Later it would seem far less coincidental. The police presence in town grew. Patrol cars circled more frequently. Flashlights swept through woods at night. Dogs barked more. Helicopters were heard over. But with every day that passed, hope dimmed, and with the vacuum of truth came speculation. One theory suggested Ethan had joined a cult. Another claimed he'd staged his disappearance as part of an elaborate online stunt. A darker version theorized abduction, that the symbol was a message from a predator, mocking law enforcement. Online forums exploded with theories, Reddit threads, TikTok breakdowns, YouTubers covering the case with animated reenactments and wild speculation. The symbol became an obsession. Conspiracy channels claimed it was part of a deep web organization, and some even linked it to other disappearances across the country. One post, now removed, claimed the symbol had appeared in a missing persons case in Oregon, the case of a 16-year-old girl who disappeared under similarly unexplained circumstances. None of it could be confirmed, but the noise made it harder for the truth to break through. The Cole household became a monument to unanswered questions. Journalists knocked less often, lights stayed off more, food deliveries were left untouched on the porch. Ethan's younger sister, Mia, stopped going to school. Her drawings changed. Where there had once been flowers and stars, she now filled pages with forests, shadowy figures, and looping shapes that resembled the symbol carved into the chapel pew. Melissa reportedly found her drawing one of those symbols in chalk on the driveway at 3. No one in the family could sleep through the night anymore. The chapel was desecrated. There's something evil here. When shown the photo of the red message painted on the altar, he became visibly shaken. I know that phrase, he said. It's from a confessional journal I read in seminary. A penitent who believed he was being stalked by something otherworldly. He kept repeating that line. I did what you asked. When asked who he thought you was, Father Reeves only shook his head. As the investigation stretched into the second week, something shifted in town. Fear began to harden into suspicion. Was Ethan still alive? Had someone in Fairhaven helped him disappear? Or worse, did someone know what happened and say nothing? Rumors turned into accusations. Friendships strained. Parents interrogated their children. Students were pulled from school. Doors slammed where once they swung open with welcome. And beneath it all was the symbol now etched into the town's identity like a scar. Fairhaven was no longer just a quiet town in the woods. It was the place where Ethan Cole vanished. And until he was found, nothing would ever be the same. In the digital age, the line between connection and disappearance is thinner than ever. And when someone vanishes, the first place investigators look is their phone. When Ethan Cole vanished, his phone was found neatly placed on his nightstand, screen cracked slightly at the corner. Battery still charged. It hadn't been touched since the afternoon he disappeared. That in itself was strange. Most teens are tethered to their phones, a digital lifeline to their world. Messages, socials, maps, photos. But Ethan had left it behind, as if he didn't want to be found. Or worse, knew he wouldn't return. The police obtained a warrant to extract data from the phone. What they found didn't point to a runaway. It pointed to something else. Ethan's last text message was sent at 4:16 p.m., just 30 minutes after school let out. It read, "It's happening tonight. I'm going. Don't follow me." It was sent to a contact saved only as a. The number, when traced, led to a prepaid burner phone, unregistered. The trail ended there. That message, vague and urgent, was the last digital footprint Ethan left. Everything else had been wiped. Photos, deleted. Internet history cleared. Chat logs empty. A full manual reset had been attempted the night before, but forensic software recovered fragments. Among the fragments were unsent drafts. These half-written thoughts never meant to be seen. One stood out in particular. If I go missing, tell them to check the symbol. This was the second time the word symbol appeared. First in his sketchbook, now in his phone. But what symbol? Investigators returned to the journal hidden beneath his floorboard. There, sketched in pen across multiple pages, was the same strange design found carved into the pew at the old stone chapel. Not random, not accidental. Ethan had known it mattered. The investigation pivoted. If Ethan had reached out to someone, someone had to know what he was walking into. Detectives returned to the one person who might have insight. Jake Monroe, Ethan's best friend since middle school. Jake had been one of the first to report Ethan missing, but now, under pressure, he admitted to something he hadn't shared before. We were in this group, Jake told investigators. Online. It wasn't anything bad at first, just a place where people talked about weird stuff. Dreams, symbols, games, secret codes. It felt like an escape. Ethan got deep into it. Jake called the group The Waking World. It was hosted on a shadowy forum tied to an encrypted message board, mostly accessed through invites or referral links. Not quite the dark web, but not mainstream either. Jake said Ethan had grown obsessed with a challenge circulating in the group, something called the passage. The passage was described as a multi-phase initiation, a kind of puzzle mixed with dares, except more esoteric. Participants were told to follow steps that mirrored old ritualistic behaviors: isolation, silence, secrecy, and eventually a physical marking. One post from the forum read, "The mark isn't just a symbol, it's a key. Only the willing pass through." Another, "Leave behind the noise. Embrace what watches. The chapel is only the beginning." Ethan had printed some of these and pasted them on his wall, hidden behind an old corkboard. When police removed it, they found 3 sheets, each with references to observation, the mark and sacrifice. Jake confirmed what investigators feared. Ethan had made plans to meet someone, a guide, as the forum called them, on the night he disappeared. He refused to give more. "I don't know who it was," Jake whispered. But he told me if I said anything they'd come for me too. The room fell silent. Investigators turned their attention to Ethan's laptop. Although it had been wiped, the memory revealed recent visits to obscure websites, encrypted chat apps, and one video, just 8 seconds long, saved under the file name Wake Up. In the video, the screen is almost entirely black. A low hum builds, then a whisper, layered and hard to decipher, slowed down, filtered and enhanced by forensic audio specialists. The voice says, "We are the silence watching. Leave your name behind. Mark your way." The video ends with a still frame of the symbol now familiar, flickering before the screen cuts out. The digital trail painted a portrait of a boy unraveling, or transforming. Ethan had withdrawn from friends, spoken less, drawn more, started deleting things he used to love, and according to Jake, he'd begun journaling phrases he claimed came to him in dreams. He said he'd been chosen, Jake confessed. He said he couldn't explain it, but he had to follow it through, even if it meant disappearing. He followed a trail that only he seemed to understand, and left behind a message that begged to be interpreted. "It's happening tonight. I'm going. Don't follow me." Those 7 words became the linchpin of the case, chilling, intentional, and heartbreak, because someone had followed him, and someone else had waited. Sometimes, answers don't come from the place you're looking. Sometimes they crash into you from somewhere else entirely. It had been 19 days since Ethan Cole vanished. Hope was dwindling. Fairhaven was exhausted, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Volunteers were burnt out. Investigators had hit wall after wall. The symbol, the messages, the journal, all led nowhere definite. But then 52 miles away in the neighboring town of Dovemont, a disturbance call came in at a 24-hour truck stop just off Route 6. It was a woman, disheveled, bruised, and barefoot, who had wandered into the restroom and refused to come out. Employees heard her sob. When police finally coaxed her out, she gave a fake name. She was twitchy, paranoid, kept asking if the watchers had followed her. At first, they assumed it was a drug-induced episode, until they saw the tattoo on the back of her neck, carved in black ink, not fresh, but clearly self-done, was the exact same symbol found in the chapel where Ethan's clue had been discovered. The same symbol sketched into his journal, drawn on chalk in his sister's dreams, and hidden in his phone. A tight spiral, intersected with broken arrows, surrounded by tiny hash marks, like tally slashes or a secret countdown. This wasn't a coincidence. When we saw that symbol, I just remember the room going cold. It was like the case, cracked open for the first time. The woman, later identified as Tess Gallagher, was 24 years old, with no fixed address. Formerly from upstate New York, she'd been off the grid for nearly a year. Her criminal record was minimal, a few petty theft charges, but nothing violent or notable. Under questioning, she broke down. What she told detectives was chilling. Tess claimed to be a former initiate of a group she called the Dreaming Eye. She said it started online, forums, chat rooms, puzzles, people from everywhere, smart kids, lonely ones, watchers who wanted to see beyond the veil. She described rituals, symbols, a test of loyalty. She used phrases like the echo chamber, the mark of silence, and the passage of forget. When detectives asked if she'd ever heard the name Ethan Cole, she paused, then nodded. He was supposed to meet them. The seer picked him. She said it like it was common knowledge, like everyone should know who the seer was. According to Tess, there were levels within the group: initiates, messengers, watchers, and above them all, the seer, someone who didn't just lead the group, but claimed to receive visions about who was chosen. Tess said Ethan's username had come up in the forum several times, that he'd been invited, that he'd agreed to take the mark and enter the veil. He was the first one they picked in a long time. She whispered. They said he was a clean soul, an empty vessel. In part, she had been a member of the Waking World Forum, the same place Jake had mentioned Ethan joining. Cross-referencing IP logs showed they had even commented on the same threads, months apart. More chilling, a private chat log recovered from a server backup included Ethan's username, null signal 17, in a group message titled Phase 3 Passage Confirmed. One user responded, marked, received. The seer is watching. Tess, when shown this message, said only, he made it to the chapel. That means he passed. But the last step's the one you don't come back from. That's when detectives asked Tess what the last step was. She wouldn't. She only looked up, eyes wide and terrified, and said, "Once you take the mark, they follow you forever." The tattoo became a key lead. Investigators consulted experts on cult iconography, alternative religions, and fringe psychology. The conclusion: the symbol wasn't from any known spiritual tradition, but elements of it mimicked sigil magic, a practice in occult circles, where symbols are drawn to represent desires, gateways, or protection. The triangle could represent focus, the spiral, a journey inward, the slash marks, maybe sacrifices, maybe stages. No one could agree, but everyone agreed on this. It wasn't random, and Ethan Cole had drawn it over and over, with increasing pressure and obsession. After the interview, Tess Gallagher was placed under psychiatric observation. She attempted to harm herself twice. On her second attempt, she used a shard of a broken mirror to try to cut the symbol out of her skin. Before losing consciousness, she reportedly whispered, "I don't want them to find me," but never spoke again. Back in Fairhaven, Ethan's parents were notified of the connection. Melissa Cole collapsed when shown a photo of the tattoo. "He had that symbol on his shoulder," she said. "Not inked, just drawn. It was there, the week before he disappeared. It wasn't permanent. He'd drawn it with black Sharpie, over and over, like it meant something." The symbol wasn't just a clue, it was a signature, a threshold, and with the discovery of that tattoo, the case of Ethan Cole was no longer about a missing boy. It was about a larger, hidden world that he'd willingly walked into, and the realization that others had already walked there before. When words fail, the subconscious finds another way to speak through patterns, symbols, art, and sometimes, the darkest truths are hiding in plain sight. It was Mia Cole, Ethan's younger sister, who first mentioned the drawing. She was sitting in the living room 2 weeks after Ethan disappeared, holding one of his old notebooks. It wasn't unusual. Mia had been clinging to anything that made her feel closer to her brother, but this time, she said something that made Melissa Cole stop mid-step. "Mom," she said quietly, "I think Ethan knew he was going to disappear." Surrounding it were drawings that didn't look like Ethan's usual style. They looked like messages. The sketchbook, up to that point, had seemed harmless. The first few pages were filled with casual drawings, landscapes, school notes, doodles of teachers, silly faces. But then, around the halfway point, something changed. The tone shifted. The art became focused, sharp, obsessed. Dozens of pages were filled with spirals, blacked-out eyes, forests, figures watching from trees, a chapel, a boy running through a tunnel. Red crayon used sparingly, only to draw the symbol, or dripping from the eyes of stick figure drawings. But most disturbing of all was one full-page drawing that appeared to be a self-portrait. It was Ethan, alone in the woods, his mouth stitched shut with X. Above him floated the symbol, and beneath it, he had written in jagged lettering, "I am already gone." When investigators reviewed the sketchbook, it was turned over to a forensic art analyst, someone who specialized in interpreting drawings related to trauma and psychological distress. Her report was unsettling. The subject appears to be cycling through emotional isolation, paranoia, and obsession. The recurring motif of eyes, both drawn and scratched out, suggests a fear of surveillance or being watched. The stitched mouth implies forced silence, combined with the ritual symbols and repetition. It presents the psychological profile of someone being indoctrinated or unraveling. The word that appeared most in her analysis: control. One section of the book stood out. The final 6 pages weren't just sketches. They were part comic, part journal. Each page told a short, haunting story. 1. A boy finds a door in the forest. 2. The door leads to a stone building. 3. Inside, he finds candles and voices. 4. A figure in a black mask offers him a choice: stay in the light or go into the silence. 5. He chooses silence. 6. The final panel: the boy walks into darkness. The last words written below: "No way back." This wasn't just imagination. This was a retelling. It was becoming clear. Ethan had documented his own descent, step by step, before vanishing. When shown the drawings, Jake broke down. He admitted something he hadn't shared before. "Ethan used to tell me he dreamed in symbols, that sometimes he'd wake up and just draw, like he didn't even remember doing it." Jake recalled one day when Ethan came to school with red ink stains on his hands and a strange calm about him. He had skipped breakfast, barely spoke all day, and during art class he drew a single red eye with a spiral inside it. Jake said Ethan claimed it came from the waking world. Detectives decided to scan the sketchbook with UV light, just in case. To their surprise, one page had invisible ink writings faintly glowing beneath the drawing of the chapel. The message, when revealed, read, "They meet in the hollow. The veil lifts only for the mark. 11:11. Look behind the stone." It was the first physical location mentioned in Ethan's own hand. Carson's Hollow, a dense patch of forest, 20 minutes from Fairhaven. Behind the stone, a new chapter of the investigation was about to begin. Ethan's sketchbook wasn't just art. It was a map, a warning, a slow, silent scream for anyone willing to see what he was really trying to say. Every mystery has someone holding a piece of the truth. But what if the person who knows too much is afraid to speak? By the time the police began combing through Ethan's sketchbook, one name kept surfacing, sometimes subtly, sometimes scrawled right into the drawings. They thought at first it stood for Jake Monroe, Ethan's best friend since elementary school, and they were right. But what they hadn't expected was how much Jake had been holding back. When detectives first interviewed Jake, he was cooperative, nervous, emotional, but open. He talked about Ethan's sudden withdrawal, the strange forum, the late-night calls where Ethan said he felt watched. But it wasn't until after the sketchbook was recovered that Jake became noticeably anxious. His phone activity spiked. He Googled things like statute of limitations on withholding information, and can I get in trouble for lying to police in missing person case. That's when they brought him back in. Jake sat with his arms crossed, eyes flicking between the detectives. It didn't take long. He broke under the pressure, not defiantly but like someone finally setting down a heavy burden. "I didn't tell you everything," he said. "I didn't know if it would help, or just make things worse." Jake went on to describe a night, 2 days before Ethan disappeared, that had haunted him since. Jake and Ethan had met up late at Ethan's request. He was agitated, pacing, eyes darting. He told Jake he'd been chosen, that they'd contacted him, that the seer had sent a direct message to his waking world profile with a test. He showed Jake the message on his phone. It was short and cryptic. "You are marked. Step 1, share no truth. Surrender no fear. Step 2, burn the past. Step 3, midnight light." Jake thought it was weird online roleplay stuff. Ethan had always been drawn to strange puzzles and online rabbit holes. But this time, it felt different. Ethan was scared, and yet he wouldn't stop. Jake told him to log off, to take a break. "You don't understand," Ethan replied. "It's not a game anymore. I saw it." Jake asked what he saw. Ethan just said, "There's a place in the woods. You won't find it unless they let you. I've been dreaming about it for weeks. Same symbols, same whispering voices. But it's not just dreams anymore, Jake. I woke up with dirt on my hands." That line, "I woke up with dirt on my hands," would haunt investigators too. Jake admitted Ethan had taken him to a clearing in the woods later that same night. They walked for almost an hour in near silence. When they got to the spot, Ethan stood in the middle and pointed at a tree with a hollowed-out trunk. Inside it was a small cloth pouch. Inside the pouch, matches, a torn page with the same symbol from the journal, and a flash drive. Jake had begged Ethan to turn it in, but Ethan would. He said he was almost there. He burned the page that night, right there, lit it in front of Jake, said it was part of the initiation. "I didn't know what to do," Jake said in his second interview. He wasn't Ethan anymore. He was like something else was driving him. When asked why he hadn't come forward with this sooner, Jake looked down. "Because the next night he sent me a message and deleted everything." The message read, "If anything happens, don't look for me. Don't follow the sign. It was my choice. Tell me I'm sorry." It was sent at 11:11 p.m., the same time Ethan had drawn in invisible ink beneath the chapel sketch. Detectives retrieved the flash drive Jake had recovered and hidden in his own room. Inside was a series of text files, some encrypted, others just long rambling notes like a diary. Most disturbing was a folder titled "Sacrifice the Self." Inside were heavily edited images, Ethan's face distorted, symbols layered over his eyes, and background noise files with whispering voices. Most were undecipherable, but one audio clip stood out. It was just 11 seconds. A boy's voice, whispering, "I am null signal. I surrender to silence. Take the burden from me." The voice matched Ethan's, and it was clear he was reciting something. A script, a pledge, something rehearsed. and recorded before he vanished. Jake was the key. Without him, we wouldn't have known half of what Ethan was involved in. But he was also terrified. Whatever Ethan got himself into, he went willing, and he kept his friend in the dark, just enough to protect him, but not enough to stop what was coming. Jake was never charged. He was a minor, and while he had held back critical information, investigators believed his fear was real. But he was never the same again. In a later social media post, since deleted, Jake wrote, "He was trying to tell me goodbye, and I didn't listen. If you're reading this, and you're playing with things you don't understand, stop, before you become someone else's unsolved mystery." Sometimes the people closest to the victim hold the deepest truths, not because they want to lie, but because the truth is too terrifying to face. And in Jake's case, knowing the truth may have saved his life. When you follow the trail of the missing, the road eventually leads somewhere you never meant to go, somewhere colder, quieter, and darker. As the investigation deepened, Ethan Cole's disappearance no longer looked like the impulsive runaway case some suspected early on. The clues were too layered, too orchestrated, and more disturbingly, it appeared someone had been one step ahead the entire time. The more we uncovered, the more it felt like we were chasing a shadow. Every time we found a lead, it was already cold. Every message was vague, every symbol meaningless, unless you already knew the code. What started as a search for one teen was slowly unraveling into something far more sinister, a possible network, or at the very least, an organized group, whose fingerprints were hidden in plain sight. Several references kept appearing across Ethan's materials. The seer has eyes, marked by silence. To go deeper, one must vanish. Digital forensics experts traced Ethan's forum activity and found multiple logins from VPN-masked IP addresses, some originating from out of state. But what concerned them most was a user known only as Obscure. This user had sent Ethan 3 private messages, weeks before he disappeared, shared encrypted links, now dead, been part of a hidden room within the forum, invite only. The invite Ethan received simply said, "You've stepped past the veil. Now walk without light." An anonymous tip traced back to a burner phone led officers to a long-abandoned underground radio relay station just outside of Fairhaven. Inside, they found several extinguished candles, a cracked mirror with the eye symbol painted on, a notebook with coded language, and Ethan's name written on the inside cover. On the walls, graffiti in red spray paint, a crude version of the symbol Ethan had drawn in his sketchbook. It was the first physical confirmation that Ethan had been there, or someone wanted them to think he had. Into the shadows was more than a phrase in Ethan's writings. It was a philosophy, a challenge, a transformation, and investigators believed that's exactly what Ethan had undergone. After additional interviews, Jake revealed a moment he'd kept quiet even after his full confession. The day before Ethan vanished, he received a picture on his phone. It came from a private encrypted number. The image showed a hooded figure standing near the old clock tower on the edge of town. Ethan, barely visible behind them, head down. The message, "He walks now with us." The metadata from the photo was wiped, but the image was timestamped at the same time. Ethan's phone signal blinked near the edge of the state forest, his last known digital footprint. This wasn't random. It was structured, layered, symbolic. The language, the rituals, the steps, it resembled a blend of old cult behavior with modern digital manipulation. The forum gave it reach. The message gave it control. It was now theorized that Ethan may have fallen into an ideological trap, something that mimicked spiritual awakening, but operated more like a psychological snare. And the more someone played the game, the deeper they sank in it. He had drawn a staircase spiraling downward. At each level, a word: 1. Curiosity. 2. Doubt. 3. Fear. 4. Silence. 5. Obscurity. 6. Sacrifice. The final level was blank. A pitch-black circle. Jake would later tell police Ethan said, "You don't get to draw the last level, you become it." So many who vanish aren't running from something. They're walking towards something that promised them answers.
When a person disappears, every shred of footage becomes sacred, a silent witness, sometimes helpful, sometimes haunting, but always watching. Ethan Cole had been missing for 11 days when the footage surfaced.
It didn't come from police surveillance or even the official search grid. It came from a trail cam mounted by a local wildlife biologist named Riley Foreman. She had set it up weeks earlier to monitor bobcat activity in the woods east of Fairhaven. But what it caught wasn't an animal. I check my SD cards every couple of weeks. Most times it's just raccoons, deer, the occasional fox. But when I loaded this one, I paused, because what I saw wasn't like anything I'd seen before. The video, time-stamped October 18th, 2:06 a.m., showed a person walking slowly, deliberately through a narrow forest path, wearing dark clothing and a hood, carrying something that looked like a small bag or pouch. There was no flashlight, no hesitation, just purposeful movement, straight toward a marked tree, a tree that bore the same painted eye symbol found in Ethan's sketchbook, and the abandoned relay station. Riley contacted local authorities the same day. The footage was analyzed by digital forensic expert. While blurry, the body structure, gait and clothing matched Ethan's known appearance. His parents later confirmed the jacket, black nylon with a torn cuff, belonged to him. But what made the video especially chilling wasn't just Ethan's presence. It was what happened next. At 2:07:43 a.m., Ethan stopped. He looked up directly at the camera, though it's unclear if he saw it. For nearly 12 seconds he stood completely still, facing the lens. Then he raised one hand and pointed at the camera. Not waved, not reached, pointed. It was deliberate, almost accusatory. And then he turned and walked off the trail, vanishing into the trees. That moment where he points at the camera, that shook all of us. It's not the kind of thing you expect from someone running. It was like he knew we'd be watching. Investigators revisited all known surveillance sources in town, looking for any additional movement from Ethan that night. Eventually, they discovered two more significant pieces of footage, both previously overlooked. The gas station camera. At 11:53 p.m., roughly 2 hours before the trail cam capture, Ethan was seen at a gas station on the north side of Fairhaven. He wasn't alone. Standing beside him, partially turned away from the camera, was a tall man wearing a long coat and a baseball cap, pulled low. His face was never visible. The man paid in cash. Ethan stood silently at the register, glancing around nervously. They bought one bottle of water, a pack of matches, a plastic-wrapped notebook. Ethan followed the man out of the store. Both of them disappeared off camera. The car they entered, if any, was never identified. 2. The church parking lot. At 12:45 a.m., a security camera from a nearby church captured Ethan standing alone in the lot, staring up at the cross illuminated by a floodlight. He had the same black nylon jacket. No sign of the tall man. He remained there for 7 minutes, unmoving. Then suddenly, he pulled something from his pocket, what appeared to be a folded piece of paper, and tucked it under a loose stone near the church wall. That paper was never found. The next confirmed footage was the trail cam. 3 video clips, 3 pieces of a puzzle, each more unsettling than the last. But the most disturbing video wasn't from a camera at all. It came from Ethan himself. The lost phone video. After Jake Monroe's confession, investigators obtained an old cloud backup linked to Ethan's account. It had been inactive since his disappearance, but fragments of his data had automatically synced before the phone was turned off. Among his media files was a short video, labeled only Mirror Test 1.mp4. It was recorded 10 days before he vanished. If you're seeing this, it means I probably didn't make it out. I don't expect anyone to understand, but there are things you can't unsee, things that follow you, things that call you by name. He pauses, blinking slowly. They told me to go quiet, to remove the noise, but silence isn't safe. It's the doorway, and once it opens, it doesn't close. The screen shakes briefly. He turns the camera toward a mirror on the wall. A symbol, the same eye with slashes, is drawn on it in what looks like red ink. He stares into the mirror, then speaks his last words on camera. I am not afraid, but I should be. The video ends abruptly. In most missing person cases, the absence is the mystery. But with Ethan Cole, it's what he left behind that chills the blood. Images, messages, silence, and a pointing finger, from the edge of nowhere. When a person vanishes, we search for the truth. But some truths don't heal, they haunt. And for the people left behind, truth doesn't always mean closure. It often brings trauma. By the 3rd week of Ethan's disappearance, Fairhaven had changed. Students returned to school, but the atmosphere was different, thinner somehow. Teachers were cautious. Parents were alert. The word Ethan was whispered in hallways like a ghost that still lingered. But for Ethan's family, and especially his mother, Rachel Cole, the days had become surreal.
the media attention, the theories, the footage, the video, and finally, the quiet. Rachel hadn't opened Ethan's sketchbook for days after it was returned. It sat on her kitchen table, untouched. But late one night, when sleep was impossible, she turned its pages, slowly, carefully, as if disarming a bomb. The images inside were disturbing. Faces with mouths sewn shut, eyes drawn over and over again. In every margin, a recurring motif, a boy drowning in ink. On one page, nearly torn through from the pressure of the pen, Ethan had written, "They don't want me, they want what I know, but I don't even know what I know." This line, "I don't even know what I know," hit investigators like a punch to the chest. It captured the essence of Ethan's psychological unraveling. He was aware something was wrong, something dark was consuming him, but he couldn't identify it, couldn't explain it even to himself. This sense of being hunted from within is a psychological state often seen in young victims of trauma. But in Ethan's case, it was also externalized, written into symbols, sketches, passwords, video fragments. It was both real and unreal. That ambiguity, for those left behind, was maddening. Mia had remained mostly silent during the early weeks of the investigation. She spoke with police, gave her statements, then withdrew. But after watching Ethan's mirror test 1.mp4 video, she had a panic attack. She told her mother she was hearing the sound from the clip in her sleep. The hum behind Ethan's voice, faint but noticeable, had become embedded in her mind. A soft, low, vibrating tone, subtle but persistent. Mia wasn't the only one who noticed. Online forums, analyzing the case, slowed the audio, isolated the tone, and ran frequency match. Someone identified it as a binaural induction file, often used in psychological manipulation, hypnosis experiments, and fringe spiritual rituals. What had started as a missing persons case had now crossed into psychological warfare, and Ethan's mind had been the battlefield. We weren't just dealing with trauma after the fact. We were looking at a trauma that had been designed, crafted, layered, delivered like a message with no return address. One image stood out. It was a close-up of Ethan's face, taken in a mirror. His expression blank, but drawn across his neck in Sharpie was the phrase, "Tell them I chose." The writing was shaky, uneven, as if done in a rush. This photo had never been posted. It remained buried in Ethan's photo cloud, likely synced by accident during auto-back. The timestamp 1 hour before the trail cam video. As public pressure mounted, and as the pieces grew more surreal, experts were brought in, forensic psychologists, cult deprogramming consultants, digital threat analysts. What they found was chilling. Ethan had been targeted. His emotional vulnerabilities were exploited. His intelligence, his artistic obsession with patterns and meaning, all were used against him. It wasn't a kidnapping in the traditional sense. It was an extraction, psychological first, then physical. Ethan's profile was textbook: high empathy, high intellect, low sense of belonging. He didn't fit in, so he searched for patterns, purpose, and someone, somewhere, offered it. Jake couldn't sleep for months. He told authorities he felt infected by the mystery. He began seeing symbols in graffiti, in TV static, even in tree bark. He asked investigators if trauma could be contagious, and in many ways, it can. The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes, it's a weight, heavy, suffocating, permanent. And for the Cole family, truth meant knowing Ethan walked willingly into whatever consumed him. He wasn't dragged, he wasn't taken, he believed in it. That was the trauma they would carry forever. "I hope he found peace," she says in a later interview. "But I'll never know if he wanted to be found, or if he planned this so we never could." Sometimes, stories don't end, they just stop. A line goes cold, a phone goes dead, a boy disappears, and we are left with fragments. In the case of Ethan Cole, every clue gave birth to more questions. The video, where he warns of a silent enemy. The sketchbook, filled with messages in symbols no one can fully decode. The forum, that led him down a digital rabbit hole, and possibly out of this world altogether. Ethan's story is not just about a boy who vanished. It's about how some disappearances begin in the mind long before the body is gone, and how, for those left behind, not knowing becomes a second kind of death. He walked willingly into the shadows. That much is clear. What's unclear is whether he ever meant to come back, or if he believed what waited beyond was somehow better. Theories remain. Was Ethan lured into a psychological cult disguised as an online community? Did he suffer a mental break, one that blurred reality and fiction until there was no line left to walk? Or was he testing something, a ritual, a belief, an escape? One final page in Ethan's sketchbook, never shown publicly, contained only a single phrase. Some maps only work if you believe in them. That was Ethan's world, one built on layers of faith, fear and fascination. Ethan, I hope wherever you are, you found your star. I hope the silence is gentle. I hope you know we never stopped looking. If you or someone you know is struggling with feelings of isolation, manipulation, or being drawn into unhealthy online spaces, please, speak up. Ethan's story reminds us that darkness doesn't always look like danger. Sometimes, it looks like fascination. Sometimes, it looks like friendship. And sometimes, it looks like nothing at all until it's too late. If you have any information related to the disappearance of Ethan Cole, even the smallest detail, please contact the Fairhaven Sheriff's Department. Your voice might be the one that finally brings light to the shadow. And if this story moved you or left you with questions, let us know in the comments. We read every one. For more true crime mysteries, watch our next video, The Final Text That Changed Everything. Until then, stay aware, stay curious, and remember, not all who disappear are truly lost. Some are waiting to be found.